each of the sessions, what we would like to see for next year. Also, what you thought about the different sessions today and last cycle of last night. Very important for us as we move into that 5-year milestone to get that kind of constructive feedback from all of you. We really appreciate that. Also, in your program booklets, there was a flyer advertising already our 5th annual symposium. Now, what's key to this, and this is only for those that are registered that are here today, is that if you register today, you get 50% off for registration next year. And we've already had some people that registered this morning. They started jump right online. So if you try to do it on Monday, that code will no longer work. So if you would like to register, go ahead and sign on today, this evening, if you don't do it now. It's very easy to do it. It's an Eventbrite website you can go right to, and you just enter the promo code early 2019. And if you didn't get to be part of the VIP reception this year, next year, take advantage, get the 50% off, and enjoy the Friday night events that we have. It's always very enjoyable. We're going to have some special things going on in Philadelphia next year. That's a mix of some folks, and we're excited about what we're going to be able to do there. So register today, and we appreciate that. Again, somebody left a cell phone down on the 4th floor, so I have a cell phone. We sit right up here. Don't know who it is. Who belongs to, but it's right here. And stay tuned. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Larry Rosenberg for our town hall section. He's moderating the session. Let's give him a warm welcome.
All right, well, we'll bring up the panelists in a second. So we're going to start our town hall session in a minute, and I want to emphasize we're going to talk for a little bit and tell some stories that hopefully will inspire you to cover a few topics. But the purpose of this is to get your perspectives and questions. The majority of this session is going to be participation, and we want you to share with us stories or ideas or inspirations for doing things that can help advance discussion and consideration of issues in a civil manner that may promote for the First Amendment itself. We're thinking, we've got our copies of the Constitution here, we're thinking of asking Lin-Manuel Miranda to come and do an inspired reading of the Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, I just learned that he's apparently hard at work on this new Broadway show called Harding. Not after Tanya Harding, but after Warren G. Harding, widely regarded as perhaps the worst president of the United States. Some songs, as we will be included, are After Teapot Go, We Can Never Go Home, and What the President's Not There, I guess he's having another affair. But so unfortunately, he could not be here. But with that, I'd like to invite our wonderful panelists to come up and sit, and I will briefly introduce them. But anyway, if you could, we also have great pictures of the panelists in the brochure, which really impressed me because I usually don't take pictures. There's some Transylvanian blood in the family. This is a Wolfsbane-free zone. So I'll start out with Larry Paul, Secretary Paul, who is the Secretary for the North Carolina Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. And Secretary Paul has a law degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And we did discuss at lunch that he is actually able to talk to people who let to do, which I think is a marvelous quality that he has. He served for 16 years in the United States Marine Corps and the Marine Reserves. He has won a number of distinguished medals and awards for his service. And he is doing a wonderful job as the secretary in North Carolina. We're very honored to have him here today. We also have on this panel Janessa Gans Wilder, and she used to be in the CIA. So everybody, please stop communicating. Foreign governments who need to do us harm right now. And she, after her service in the intelligence community, she went on to work with grassroots issues and founded as the chief executive officer of the Euphrates Institute, which is a grassroots building organization. She is widely cited. She's an author. She gets interviews all over national media. And we're going to try in this panel, as I say, to sort of share some stories and inspire you to share your stories that hopefully help us all make a difference in service of the First Amendment and civil discourse. So let's start the program. Great. So let me start. Wow, these mics are working wonderful. So let me start with Secretary Hall. If you maybe share a few thoughts with us.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's been a great day today. So I came in a little early and I'm glad I got to sit through and enjoy and learn so much. I get an opportunity and had an opportunity to serve in a profession and to serve a profession that is thought to be apolitical sometimes and has those structures up around it so that it's almost as if the military is muted. Speaking of my mic, I didn't make it said mute, and it didn't mean mute, it meant unmute, but anyway. And so that is always a challenge. What is the role of the military, or what are the roles we all have in promoting and defending and ensuring the First Amendment, the constitutional values we talk about are involved? I had the opportunity to serve in the legislature. I'm going to tell one story about a legislator who was a leader in the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives of North Carolina. And at the time, they were trying to pass voter ID to make it so that people could not vote. And he was a senior legislator who was dying of cancer at the time. He was a bishop in the church and had a large denomination, but he lived approximately 200 miles from Raleigh, so he had to come work every week and stay. And everyone wrapped around him and made sure he made it to session because we had a small margin. And if he didn't show up along with a few other people, they would pass voter ID and prevent people in North Carolina who didn't vote for many, many years, not had a problem, would now be unable to vote. And the speaker at the time was of the opposition party and wanted to pass this. And he would wait and have sessions late into the night and early in the morning, hoping this gentleman would not show up or would have to leave because he had the physical stamina no more. Now, he made it through that session, and he had to leave in between votes and go outside the door of the chamber and lay on the couch and try to gather his strength during the time when we weren't having a vote. And that example of public service and dedication to his oath that he took to represent his people and protect those constitutional opportunities and values stuck with me. And so whenever someone, and I see someone who says they want to participate in public service, and it's always a question, do you really want to serve? Do you really believe? Or do you want to be able to hold a press conference and be on TV? And his example is one that just sticks in my mind. I'll give one other quick example that was military related. And, you know, we have a saying that only Marines can make Marines. And as guardians of the profession, and we have our own guardians, they're called drill instructors, who have this idea that if you don't pass their muster as they pass the muster of those before them, you do not deserve the title of Marine. We had that taken to the extreme in the Marine Corps one time when we had 13 recruits die because of overzealous drill instructors. And they marched them into the swamps in South Carolina, and a tremendous backlash occurred. But that responsibility to be guardians of the profession, but not execute those who want to participate and prove their work, is just one we carry with us as a Marine Corps, as an institution, and a lesson for all of America.
So let me ask you a question. When you were serving in the military, were you able to have discourse about public events that you felt in a free way, or did you feel that your discourse was stifled?
As a culture, I think we consciously stifled our discourse. We did not have any balanced representation of issues that were happening in places we could be deployed. I served on what we call the Airlift Force, Camp Lejeune, and that was the force that flies out immediately to whatever hotspot in the world and has to be trained at a certain level. And we would worry about tactical briefings and security briefings and combat techniques, but never venture outside, either consciously, unconsciously, or culturally. We would not venture outside of that information bubble. We would stay in that bubble, and that's what we did, knowing that someone else was making those decisions, and we were reacting. We removed ourselves from being citizens and just became the military, and that's dangerous. And I had some discussions earlier about the Pentagon Papers and what that meant and what that was about the reporting being done on Vietnam and the studies done afterwards to determine exactly what did the United States government know over those 4 or 5 administrations that it was conducted, and what did they tell the American people as we continue to elect people who said they had solutions or ways to either make the war worthwhile or to end it. And so when we find out at the end of the day that we never knew the truth, and we continue to vote people in and commit troops and resources to something we knew was not the course of action to be successful, emphasizes again, if you're in the military, you've been in the military, you need to guard the First Amendment and those rights and that information, because it dictates your livelihood, your life, your family, your country, and we can't check out just because we're in the military. The First Amendment is as important, or maybe even more so, to military families and communities. And we need, as veterans, as active duty people, as leaders, to ensure we protect them.
One other question which we haven't talked about, but I thought might be a good insight. In the folks you served with in the Marine Corps, surely there were people who had similar political beliefs to yours, different political beliefs. How did you get along with them? Because obviously, as a unit in the military, you all have jobs to do, and you can't be disagreeing with one another. So how did that work?
Well, first of all, I guess I can comfortably say I was in a super minority for a lot of reasons, but politically as well. And what I would always try to do is center the discussion on the values we had professed as the Marine Corps and the facts of the situation, and continue to have any discussion based on, is this consistent with our professed values, and what are the facts? Not what did they tell us, but what are the facts? What do we know to be the facts? And how is the way this is being handled stack up to our professed principles? And if we took a vote most of the time, I would lose, but I would make my point and survive to fight
the conversation and talk about a couple of points that you wanted to raise.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's awake after lunch and those amazing workshops. Just grateful to be here, and I just want to open it up to center ourselves too what's happening in the larger conversation and in the world right now around this question. I mean, yesterday we witnessed 4 million people, over 4 million young people especially, which they're calling the largest strike, largest movement on behalf of the climate, and the largest youth-led movement in history, talk about the exercise of our First Amendment voice, that freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. It's amazing the context that we're living in right now. And today, the International Day of Peace, there are hundreds of thousands, if not more, activities, grassroots peace-building activities happening around the world. You know, when the International Day of Peace first got started, even the Taliban agreed on that day to lay down their weapons. So the idea was, if we could start with one day of a ceasefire, one day of peace, then that can build. Maybe it can build to 2 days, to a week, to a month. So the conversation we're having is so alive and well. And yes, we see so much on the media, we see so much division, and yet there's this whole other story that is so powerful. And Greta, you know, the 16-year-old with the long braid who started this, you know, now we see, oh, look how powerful, you know, she's become this voice, this influence. She was, a year ago, she was alone, one person holding a sign, striking from school every Friday. She had no friends. She went on by herself in front of the Swedish parliament to protest the climate. And now it's millions of people. And so just to think about the power of even one person, when your motives and your intentions are pure, when you believe in something, and yet she was willing to go it alone for such a long time, and she believed in it to her core. And so now, I think even as young people, well, you know, you have to have lots of followers or likes, or it has to be this huge thing. No, just one person with the purity of intention can make such a difference. I think that matters too when we think of Washington. You know, a lot of, you know, when I graduated from grad school, immediately came here, well, this is where the power and the influence and decisions are made, and if I really want to make a difference, it has to be from Washington. And then I quickly learned, oh, change doesn't come from Washington, it comes to Washington. But it really is about the power of the grassroots. And there are theories of social change that bear this out. There's a wonderful study from Everett Rogers out of Stanford, who looked at thousands of case studies of how social change happens. And what he found is that 2% of the population are the innovators. They're the Greta Thunberg with the idea, the vision of what's possible. That this has got to change, and there's a new model, there's a new way forward, and we need to act on that. And they're the ones who put that idea out there. And then there are the early adopters, and they're 5% of the population. They hear that new idea, they find that it resonates with them, even though it's so different than the norm, than business as usual, than what's on the media, but it resonates with them, and they adopt that new idea. They get behind it. And then what he found, Rogers, in these studies, is that between 5 and 20% of the population adopting the new idea or new mindset, it would hit the tipping point, and then it would reach to everyone in the population, even the late adopters. The late adopters tended to be those in positions of power and influence, you know, say Washington in a lot of respects. And so, in a way, it really doesn't take a majority of the population or majority of the people. It only takes that small percentage. And even now, the jury's out on whether governments will react and put into place legislation on the climate. But you'll notice, if they do, it will be as a reaction to, as a response to that power of the grassroots and the power of the people. So really, the impetus, the catalyst, and the source has come from people, has come from grassroots, and governments are reacting to that. So you can see really where the power lies. Where it is in us, it is in people, it is in youth, it is in the grassroots. And this has just been so powerful for me, and I just want to Sure. There was Tony Paz, who was here earlier, and he and I were in Iraq together, and just he brought back all these memories of Fallujah and I was in Iraq for almost 2 years during the war. But anyway, one of the most poignant memories for me, we were to talk about how do you actually build bridges in a polarized society. And one of the most amazing things I got to be part of is so little, and that's go back to the power of an individual. And do we have to all do these huge things to change the world? No, it could be very simple, very everyday, normal things that we engage in. But actually, you don't know the power of those small things and the ripple effects. So anyway, when I was in Iraq, my only time off was Friday mornings. I lived for Friday mornings, and I would go play ultimate frisbee on the field in the green zone. I was always the only woman, and we just were out there, rain or shine. Well, it never rained. So dust, storm, or shine, we were out there. And so there was a field where we were playing, and it was Marines and some State Department people and Army, and then you had Iraqis on a nearby field, and they were playing soccer. And some of them were barefoot and from the green zone and all over, and I just thought it was like this divide. You know, we were on one side and they were on the other side, and just kept thinking it would just be so great to connect and to play together. And I'm going to make this happen. And so I went to my some Iraqi friends, because I didn't speak Arabic at the time. I said, can you help me organize a tournament? I want to facilitate, just get together and play. And we're not going to play soccer because there's so many heated emotions around soccer. Everyone has their favorite team. There's a lot of different levels of skill. And there's just a lot of emotion around it. But ultimate frisbee, no one knows what they're doing. Let's just start with something neutral. And so we got all these Iraqis together, both from inside the green zone and outside. I broke all the rules, left to escort them in using my badge, and bring them in, and we had this tournament. So the Iraqis lined up here, and the Americans lined up here. I thought, oh no. And they started to work, divide themselves into teams. And I said, no, we're going to mix up the teams. This is not Iraqis versus Americans. This is, mixed, diversified teams. And we explained the rules of the game, and we started in. And I don't know if you've ever played, sports before, but usually it's not a silent game. There's noises. Well, it was just silent. They couldn't communicate with one another. There was tension. There was hostility. I mean, these are people where this is the enemy. The only Americans that these Iraqis really had interacted with is on the other side of the tank. Vice versa. We were there. I was a counterinsurgency analyst. I had my hit list. These are people we had to take down. And so it was just tense. But slowly, as the game evolved, you saw the tension start to melt. And then there was like a smile. And then there was a thumbs up. And then there was, good job. But it slowly started to get less silent and more interactive. And by the end, then there were pats on the back. And then by the end, there were hugs. And even some of the Marines ran over to the PX and bought tennis shoes for the Iraqis who've been playing barefoot. And it was just this truly amazing coming together and unifying and connecting. And we kept those games going for a very long time afterwards, until the Iraqis started getting death threats for playing with Americans. And we had to shut it down. But for a long time after that, the Americans would say to me, that was the highlight of my tour, of my deployment, because for the first time, I could see Iraqis as human beings, and that we were there, we were together, in a common purpose and a common goal. And it really touched me. Such a simple thing, just one crazy idea, and the ripple effects that can have on the lives of both the Iraqis and the Americans is powerful. And so I just want to say that we just shouldn't underestimate the simple, the ordinary, the everyday, and the impact that can have.
That's amazing. We were thinking of having Janessa organize an ultimate frisbee for this symposium, but unfortunately the CIA would have to then target the participants. But that is a great story. Janessa, let me ask you this question. You talk about grassroots, and some of what we're talking about is social change, some of what we're talking about is political change. If somebody out there wants to do something, would you recommend that they try to do something at the federal level, at at the state level and the local level, what would you think would be the most effective, or should somebody do it at any level if it's something they believe is wrong?
Well, I think we've tried the federal level. You know, we in Iraq, we had all the power and might and the power of the army at our disposal. And I went back 5 years later after to see, we did a documentary on what had changed. And I was so excited to see, you know, we sowed these roots, there's a constitution, what had changed. And I interviewed all my former Iraqi colleagues in government, and they said, well, no, nothing has changed. It's all the same people. In fact, it's even more divided and entrenched. And I realized that you can't change a dictatorship mentality into a democratic mentality, or a dictatorship mindset into a democratic mindset. This is what we were doing, is changing surface things. We were tinkering with institutions or policies, and what we needed to do was change mindsets. That is a whole different ballgame. You don't change mindsets at the federal level. You only do that in community, one-on-one, at the local level. That's where it starts. If there is enough of that change of mindset, then it can actually, when you write the policy, it actually has teeth. It actually can gain traction. So if you really want to, and yet we need both, right? Of course, what if there's all this change here, then the policies still say that you don't need, I'm thinking of Trump going to California and eroding all of the high gas mileage that we've enforced, and so you have to have the balance. But really, if you want to feel a sense of satisfaction, or to see and witness and be a part of change, real change and transformation, which is the most fulfilling thing, I think, to be a part of, it has to start on that one-to-one individual community level.
So let me make an observation and a little bit of a recommendation. We've talked a lot at this symposium, and I think the speakers have been great in doing it, about curiosity, about tolerance, about discourse, and how people's brains develop in a way that sometimes makes that very difficult. One thing that I think that every one of us could potentially do is to try to influence the education of our kids in tolerance and curiosity. My daughter who's here today goes to a Jewish school where they have a course in tolerance and listening to other people's viewpoints. And I can't even remember what grade it was, 4th grade, 5th grade, something. And they're graded on this. They actually get a grade on how tolerant they are and willing to listen to other people's points of view. Now, I don't know if there are any public schools that teach that, but one thing we could all do is go to our school boards and suggest in the public school that you should be teaching tolerance and respect for other people's viewpoints. Another thing we can do is, many of the people here belong to religious institutions, churches, whatever, and most of those institutions have education of the children as well. And we could go to our religious institutions and suggest, hey, maybe you should teach our children a little bit about tolerance and respecting other people's viewpoints. I think a lot of religious institutions already do that, but there are some that can do it more. And this is something that I think every one of us, as a start at least, could do. Because I think advocating for that is really a great first step, potentially, into getting to the places of civil discourse and connection and tolerance that we've been talking about today. Let's open this up for discussion, since this is supposed to be the town hall portion of today's activities. I don't know if we have mobile mics that are working, but if anyone would like to either share a story of inspiration, ask a question, have some kind of comment on what we've been talking about here or what we've talked about throughout the day, please feel free. This is your time.
I have a question to Secretary Hall.
Thank you. Secretary Hall, you spoke earlier. Your references seem to be more related to the military and the time that you might have served yourself. But I also know, of course, that you are Secretary of Veterans in general in North Carolina. So as you interact with different veterans and perhaps veterans organizations, do you see this polarization issue playing out among just the veterans themselves that can now speak freely or operate freely within the political realm? And if so, how does that impact your work with those various groups?
One of the things we see is veterans now, especially from Iraq and Afghanistan wars, are entering a lot of public service roles and participating. And the question always comes up, how are you going to translate that service and experience into your role as a public servant, whether you're on the school board or county commissioners or running for state legislature, or we've had a spate of candidates now running for Congress who have that experience. And we have from North Carolina a lot of Congress people who've had no military experience. The overall number of military affiliated in Congress went down and has now started to come back up because of succeeding generations who had not mandatory service, but maybe inspirational service because of 9/11. A lot of people decided they wanted to participate in the military. For organizations in our state, the same thing is true. We try to bring the message to everyone, all of our veterans. We've got 1 million of them in North Carolina, out of about 11 million total population. If you figure each one of them has a relative, now we're up to 2 million people in that community. 14 community-based outpatient clinics, 4 of the medical centers, a lot of veterans, a lot of active duty folks who are going to become veterans. And so it's important for us to talk to them about being part of the community, part of the responsibility you have, because you come from the community, you'll be in service for a while, but you'll ultimately come back to the community. And what does your family benefit or suffer as a result of you being in the military, and when you come back to feel that void? Who takes up the slack while you're gone? And what kind of society do you come back to? So I feel like we try to push the message out there of the requirement that you look at those issues that affect the military, and you have an issues-based discussion. You believe in public education? 90+% of military families have to have public education. So are you going to be someone who supports that? You believe in access to health care? Once again, where are you going to get your health care from, or your relatives or other people who don't get VA benefits but live in your community? Where do they get their health care from? And it's an interesting twist in North Carolina because we have the second highest population of rural veterans, meaning they have a problem accessing, as in every other state and every other segment of society. If you're in a rural area, you have more of a challenge in accessing broadband, education, jobs, and cultural amenities. And so our veterans have that same challenge and have to think more holistically about the community, not just about themselves and their small slice of their career while they're in the military. So we challenge them, we explain it, we talk about those issues in an issue-based discussion, and trust them to make that connection and understand who's really voting for issues that affect your livelihood and your life and your family and your community. And above all, it's the community. Above all, it's the community. So we're a focused community. If you message to us and talk to us, meaning veterans, on issues that they understand affect them and their community, we're big for our team. We don't go anywhere by ourselves. And everywhere we go, there's somebody who has served, or has a family member who served, or knows someone, friend, or acquaintance who served. So we're kind of the hidden one out there, but we're trying to be responsive and get them to stand up and take that responsibility.
Janessa, in your experience, have you worked with military folks, or retired military folks, in some of your grassroots initiatives?
Not really, but I'll tell you what the ethic of service, because I work so closely with the military during my time in intelligence, and I come from a military family. My grandfather was in the Army, my dad was in the Air Force, my brother was a Navy SEAL, so I've been familiar with that side of things. And in fact, I'm kind of the black sheep because I went into peace building. But anyway, the ethic of service and complete commitment and duty is the same. And that's what's so interesting, because now I work with this global community of peace builders who are similarly laying their lives, putting their lives on the line for this work. But with no weapons, no support at their disposal, sacrificing their families, their individual finances, and their lives. For example, our dear Emmanuel in Cameroon, there's right now this incredible civil war happening, and local Cameroonians are describing it as a genocide against the Anglophone minority, and there's the Francophone majority. His family, he's a young minister, he has a young family. They fled to Tanzania over a year ago. He hasn't seen them in over a year, and he stayed behind in Cameroon to be there as a support for his people, and he is starting youth peace clubs to bring Anglophones or Francophones together in the midst of this incredibly horrible environment. And let me just tell you, the pictures that he has sent me of what he sees every day, the devastation of burned buildings, the corpses that he has to step over just to get out of the church, kids with heads, struck with machetes and it's just the most graphic things I've ever seen. And I said, Emmanuel, where'd you get these pictures? He said, I took these. I have hundreds more like this. This is what I see every day. And he has this permagrin, the most loving, soulful, joyous, huge laugh. And I just say, how can you keep that amazing smile, that sense of joy in the midst of all that you are seeing and doing? And he said, I have to be this way for my people. My community needs me. I could never leave them. I have to do this, but I do come home and weep every day. And what he's doing is so outrageously risky that he is, because he's now an enemy of both sides. The separatist government, he's out there sacrificing his life every day for peace. I call him a warrior for peace. That he would be willing to do that kind of service and commitment and sense of duty to his people, to his community, to bring people together that's how is that different than military service? It is such an incredible service, and I just pray that he doesn't lose his life in the line of duty of this peace mission that he's taken on, because it is just unbelievable the difference he's making for youth and for the people of his community.
Another question.
Maybe? Yes? Pretty close, okay. Hi, my name is Emily. I work with Veterans for American Ideals, but I got my master's in Peace and Justice Studies, and so kind of what you're talking about is, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about negative peace and positive peace. And so negative peace is just kind of like the absence of conflict, but then positive peace is like building sustainable constructs that can be implemented in societies. And so I was just wondering if each of you guys could kind of talk about what your organizations and how you, both of you, kind of like work towards these in your community, just building more like sustainable constructs. Hopefully that was specific enough.
I'll just jump in on, I loved an analogy that I heard from an Iraqi minister about negative peace. He didn't say this was that, but I was like, oh, that's negative peace. So he described Iraq as a radiator with the cap that's been on, and then we came and we took the cap off and the contents exploded. So I feel like that's kind of negative peace, that like, okay, nothing, it hasn't exploded and it's under wraps, but one trigger, one small thing, and it's so tense in there. You think of the pressure inside the radiator, and so you take it off and it explodes. So is that really a stable, sustainable? Are people feeling, appreciated and connected and all the things that are needed? And so definitely what we want is to build the sense of unity, of connection, cohesion, community cohesion, and the sense of realization that we're all in this together. What I'm doing affects you, what you're doing impacts me, and that's what we're all really longing for. for, right? We're yearning for that sense of deep connection and appreciation and being seen and heard. And so, of course, we want to progress to that. And we do that in my work in just very, very simple ways. Just listening is the big thing. It's like, do you say it's a superpower? Someone says listening is a superpower. Sure. I heard that from someone who's attributed to her. But it really is this gift, the gift of listening, because you've got that person and giving people a chance to tell their story, especially if you're coming from conflict zones where you've experienced trauma and loss. It's so powerful. But even that simple thing, even I'm thinking about our work with Israelis and Palestinians, there's not an acknowledging both sides, is that acknowledging that whole side's history and the narrative and the collective narrative. And so sometimes just being able to vent and just spill it out, then you can be curious after that, and you can be open, and you can actually listen to another point of view. And so just simple things we learn in kindergarten, right? The importance of listening and sharing and acknowledging and being part of a community are the key elements.
I think one of the things that's valuing humanity to be shown by organizations and veterans, there are lots of different veterans organizations that go to affected countries and provide service. And I just thought off the top of my head, two of them, and both foreign and domestic, as you talk about Red, White, and Blue, which is an organization of volunteers that go into many times devastated communities where they would have natural disasters or whatever to go and help build back. And then Team Rubicon that maybe most recently got a lot of headlines for their work in Haiti after the devastation they had, and what they did with military volunteers going in and organizing and helping the communities build back, not in uniform, but working together and showing that humanity and caring for an affected population. That can happen all over the world and happens. And so domestically, it's important, again, for us to be involved and show that humanity and the fact we're part of the community. And internationally, they're unpaid, uncertified ambassadors of goodwill, but also making a difference in their lives and showing that they care. So that connectivity is always important, to value someone and let them know that you value them as a human being, as a person on this earth and in the larger community. So not being paid, not there on behalf of the government, but as an NGO or whatever that is doing good work in that community at no pay. And that sacrifice for someone else just crosses all boundaries, I believe.
Yeah, and I think as we've covered in several of the programs and the workshops, the human connection that you have when you're trying to talk to people and solve problems is just critical, is getting those people to get to know the people you're talking to. Because it is very hard to make inroads in any problem or any dispute if you don't know the person you're talking to. And so the first step is to establish that human connection. And then the second step in many respects is to really try to understand the problem from their perspective or the issue from their perspective. Listen to their story carefully, ask questions, get them to really explain it, and then maybe you can add your thoughts. But I think that's a great way to do it. Other questions or stories people want to share?
Hi, thank you both. My name is Corin. I live across the river in Virginia. I'd like to ask the two of you, or maybe the three, just your thoughts on, I'm going to frame the question here very briefly. So I was a grad student at George Mason in the School for Conflict Analysis. And during part of that time, I drove for Uber because I'm a grad student. Last year, during the Stanley Cup Finals, when the Capitals won out in Las Vegas, I was driving. I should deliver a pizza here on 7th Avenue, about a block from here. Everybody, after the win, everybody was celebrating, hugging, tears. I didn't do a scientific poll, but I guarantee you there were people with at least 4 different shades of skin, at least 2 or 3 different political ideologies, probably from all 6, maybe at least 6 continents. I don't know if anybody from Australia was here cheering on ice hockey. And my point is, there were all these categories that humans struggle with. Nobody's identity was minimized. Nobody tried to change their, I'm just going to call it subcategory. Everybody was celebrating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what if we tried to find a way to reshape, not minimize, not erase, just reshape our primary category. You just mentioned the human connection. So what if we walked around and when we went to lunch or when we drove in the car and when we went to a soccer game, to the grocery store, and we saw everybody with a Caps jersey on, human. I'd love to hear your visceral reaction to what if we tried to find a way to kind of sort of reshape identity, not take it away. Your skin color still matters. Your ethnic background still matters. Your religion still matters. Your political ideology. Our differences are what we should celebrate. I've heard someone say that before. But if we can't find a way to embrace our common humanity, what if we found a way to embrace that and elevate that in some way? I know it's not 100% possible, but a 3-degree shift.
Well, I'm going to talk from a military standpoint because I think that experiment has already been done and proven to work. And you can ask any Marine, and I'll say any person in the United States Army, or I don't know about the Air Force because they're usually at the club, but I'm sure sometimes they no Air Force people in here, right? So I hope nobody's watching from the Air Force. But the point being that what you talked about is people come into the organization, they check basically their identities at the door, and they're aspiring to achieve a new and uniform identity, and that is the objective. And sure, it's a utopian world. When you go into a military base, you're in a military unit or a situation, it really is a utopian world because we're able to achieve that. And then the question becomes, how can we exploit that? Now, obviously, the military has a lot of problems, still has problems with discrimination and other issues on all kind of different fronts. But by and large, that is the philosophy that's used to create our military, that idea. Or we could use, I know there's some football fans here, even though the team left D.C. and won't be here this season. But that was a joke. We were talking about the Redskins. But if you think about it, and the example I was going to use wasn't the Cowboys, but the Patriots. Whether you like them or not, they have a certain brand where they bring folks in and say, check your differences at the door. We're going to work together and we're going to be patriots and adhere to what this ideal is of excellence and performance. And so you're not talking about mentalistic things like that, but being great human beings is really what you're talking about. And I think that would be a great effort to make, to get different organizations to say, I'm a capital, I'm human. Or create a logo for humankind, whatever that is. I'm sure there's one out there. And the sales of that to say, I'm on the humankind team, whatever that is. So
you could use Prince's former symbol.
There's an award-winning documentary out now. I think it's called Earthrise, and it's the effect that the astronauts had when because all their prep and their training was focused on getting to the moon, and they didn't even think about looking back. And it was even happenstance that they actually took a picture back of Earth, but they all had this incredible moment of transformation and awe and wonder when they looked back and they saw the Earth. And all alone, floating in space, this little dot that was the only place that every human being had in this whole universe that they called home. And that from that vantage point, you also couldn't see any country delineations or borders. It was just this tiny blue dot. and then it changed their whole, it truly changed them. And it's fascinating to hear their interviews. And then when they came back, they're working for causes and things about bringing people together and bridging divides. And so I think that's kind of, getting at what you're saying, that we are all just members of this one planet. And I think we need to even take it higher and not just talk about humankind, but that really we share this planet with all these other creatures. What is it now? 1 million species are expecting to be extinct. I mean, it's crazy. It's unconscionable. And so how do we not just develop compassion for each other, but for all the folks that share this planet, this one home, is so critical to redefine that. I love that sense of redefinition.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about here is finding some cause or ideal that's common, that people can all relate to. And obviously a sports team is one of those. I think one effort that I've seen that a lot of people in this room work on are interfaith initiatives, because typically, not always, but typically people who belong to a religious organization work together pretty well. And then if you can branch out to other religious organizations and get together, that's one way people can work and feel pretty good about bridging gaps and getting to know others. That's certainly one way to do it. There are other ways. I mean, obviously in the military, there's a particular, you're in an environment where that's essential. But there are a lot of ways to do it. And I think, keep thinking about ways to come up with a common goal, cause, ideal, perhaps the First Amendment, to bridge everyone together and have everyone working toward getting along with everybody. Question? Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? So as a public diplomacy academic and practitioner, one of the things that makes my skin crawl is the phrase winning hearts and minds, because that means that somebody loses. And so I would love to be able to have you address this prevailing viewpoint that of winning a heart and mind, especially when it comes to the Middle East and Iraq and Afghanistan. Afghanistan went from the why do they hate us to winning hearts and minds, and there's a complete disconnect in the respect for the other's point of view. And so I would love to if you guys would address that as a way of following on this discussion.
I've never heard of that. That's so powerful. The idea of that there's losers. I've heard of winning hearts and minds, but that automatically means the other side is really powerful. The phrase that we use is, and it's not a phrase that we use, but I grew up with a brother. So I had one brother, Navy SEAL, Superman guy, and then a brother with special needs and who can't talk. And the way that he was treated all my growing up, and he was my brother, but everyone treated him as the other and made fun of him and were, mean to him, and even family members who were violent towards him. He was different, and that scared people. And I realized in my work that we need to turn the other or see the other as a brother, because in reality there is no other. We are one human family. We're all connected. If we other the other person, we're just in an interconnected world. We're just doing that to ourselves. It comes back to bite us. And so that's kind of the phrase I would use instead of winning hearts and minds, is seeing the other as a brother, because in reality that is who it is. We're one family. But we are one family, right? Global Peace Foundation.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this by giving a practical example. What is on the table here being discussed is to focus on a more fundamental identity, right? Beside our religious differences or racial, ethnic differences, a fundamental shared identity. From the work we do, we believe it's when you get close to a person, right? The common experience for all human beings is we all are part of a family, right? We all have parents and brothers and sisters, and when we feel close to someone else, we use familial terms. And so focusing on our shared identity as the human family we believe is most important. I want to share a practical example. In Nigeria, there's a lot of serious conflict that is very, very complicated. Right? The nation is, roughly speaking, half Muslim and half Christian, and so oftentimes it is framed in religious terms, even though the underlying causes are more complicated. Global Peace Foundation in Nigeria is working with some incredible peace builders in a central state called Kaduna. So much revolves around individuals who make a difference. The starting point for the peace building work there was two people, a Christian minister and a Muslim sheikh, who work on the community level. And so they have begun a peace building program there called, focused on the one human family. They call it the One Family Under God campaign. Right? And so they're engaging people on the local level with a simple message. Before I am Hausa or I am Igbo, right? Before I am Christian or Muslim, I am part of the one human family. I am part of one family under God. And that is a practical application that, in fact, is getting tremendous traction. It's slow work, but it's the kind of work you were mentioning, Janessa, starting from individual people, changing your mindset. Right? So how do we help each other to see each other first and foremost as connected, that we have a common base, that we have a shared identity that in no way undermines our larger differences, but it's in the one human family. And one final point I'd like to make, many people in our global experience come from large families, right? And in a larger family or an extended family, there's all kinds of differences. You got an uncle like this and a brother like that or a sister like this. They're different, right? And so we experience within the family that we can have many differences, but we're all fundamentally connected. Focusing on the human family, in our view, is the way to go.
Well, I don't have an answer or a comment on the question. I think it's a great follow-up to the whole idea and the challenge that we faced. I have to step off the panel. I want to say thank you to the whole group of you who participated today and invited me in, to everyone sponsoring the conference. I look forward to working with you in the future, and thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Secretary. So we do still have a little more time for our town hall, and so if there are other questions and comments, we'd like to take them and spend a few more minutes talking through things.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello? No?
Test.
Hello? There, okay. I just wanted to suggest another example similar to the one that you were just talking about in Nigeria, that Janessa could talk about in terms of Côte d'Ivoire, perhaps, how one person can make a difference and how it actually is bringing many peoples together.
Yeah. His name is James Ofu. He's another grassroots peace builder who just has a heart to do the right thing. And he was just interested in these issues and saw a lot of tribal conflict taking place in Côte d'Ivoire. And he just thought, well, someone has to do something about it. And since no one was, he said, okay, I'll step up and do something. So he just looked up different resources online and eventually connected with this couple in the Bay Area who do a lot of work, Len and Libby Traubman, who do a lot of work on listening and dialogue, and started Zoom calls with them and learning how to do that. And then he ended up being the only person to reconcile these two tribes, the Gary and Dozo, in Côte d'Ivoire. and who was gutsy enough to go into the active conflict areas, and he reconciled these groups. And he's also now taking that to work with albinos and non-albinos. The albino community in many countries in Africa is extremely persecuted, even uses sacrifice, is just horrible. And he is humanizing, truly a dehumanized population. So now he wants to share what he's learned, and we're working with him to train 100 youth peace builders a year on a pittance. I mean, it just takes so few resources to actually make such a huge difference. And he's now sharing that, and his one person, again, is now being amplified countrywide.
Yeah, I'll just make one additional point, which is some of these questions about ways to bring us together in commonality and unity that strikes me, and I don't want to beat a dead horse about education, but how many elementary schools teach ethics and philosophy, right? None. Why not? Right? Again, in the religious schools, you're learning religious morality and philosophy, and I'm not saying you should have a particular, but at least teach comparative ethics or comparative philosophy to kids at a young age. And I think most kids will sort of figure out what's good and what's not. But we're not doing that, and I think that's a real shame. Yeah.
So I just to piggyback on what Jim Flynn said, he made a comment about mindset and this changing of mindset. And I think that it starts with us first. You had mentioned about, when people come together for football games or whatever it might be, there are so many times that it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is or whatever it is. But I think it all starts with each one of us. If we change our mindset, then we can turn that over to someone else and show them. It's just like with children. I've always taught my kids, you accept everyone. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what religion they are. But if each one of us can take a hold of that within us and say, okay, I'm going to make the first step. If we make the first step, then someone else is able to follow us.
Amen.
As a religious leader myself, I really want to underline what I sense Mr. Rosenberg was emphasizing with the interfaith dialogue, seeing religion as part of the solution to getting towards peace, rather than, I think, a Western and American mindset that I sometimes even saw with the State Department or the military, saw that in Iraq and Afghanistan sometimes, trying to work to professionalize their religion and cultural advisors, equivalent of their chaplains. I'm a chaplain, but I think we need to be careful, and we're often fooling ourselves if we think the American evangelical is going to set aside their core conviction that they're a Christian first, and that the Muslim is going to set aside their core conviction that they're a Muslim first. That's not just the working poor classes and a problem of short water supply and the environment. That's what people in your highest classes in Pakistan at military schools I've seen will tell you. And I think I've seen that can even bias our American objective analysis sometimes in trying to build peace. When we try to say, well, religion's not really the issue here, it's tribal, it's environment, we try to substitute some other common ground, rather than saying there's a good order and discipline we need to learn for civil discourse, like with the Marines. I think the real solution was not that they had to check their identities at the door. Ultimately, that raises other problems like sexual harassment in the military. We want people able to safely bring their convictions into the sphere of discourse, but not result to violence and immediately. Does that make sense? I think really we need, if we're going to get conservatives and liberals, if we're going to get people globally into accepting what we're trying to build in a peaceful environment, we've got to stop thinking that religion's the problem or pretend that's not the real issue with a lot of people. and bring that interfaith dialogue. I believe that's true internally and externally.
Yeah,
But I'm
no,
biased as a religious leader. I want to get you.
No, I think it is. And I've seen a number of instances, both at the organizational level and at the interpersonal level, of people of different faiths who have very different religious groundings and beliefs finding common ground and discussing them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be people of faith. I mean, I've seen pretty, rabid atheists talk to people of faith and find common ground and be able to do it. But the point is open-mindedness and working toward that and actively pursuing that kind of dialogue. And I think it helps tremendously.
My only quick follow-up would be that we can get people to realize out of their faiths.
Yeah.
That we have common ground vision.
Right. Right.
I would just add to that a group we partner with, do you know the United Religions Initiative? They're the largest interfaith grassroots network in the world, and they have over 1,000 interfaith groups in over 100 countries. And what's amazing about the founding is it was some anniversary of the UN, and they came to this Bishop Swing in California and said, can you, we're getting the nations together for the anniversary of the UN, can you bring the religions together? And, like the United Religions. And he said, gosh, well, there is no United Religions, and we don't really get together, and how am I going to do that? So he realized, wow, there is this forum for nations to come together to solve world challenges and to be in dialogue and to address, what do we need to do about refugees and all these things. And there was no body or group for religions, which are supposed to be about, selflessness and humility and loving your neighbor and the golden rule. And there was no similar parallel forum for them. So he went out to create this. And he went to the leaders of all the top religions, and they said, no way in hell are we going to deal with the Catholics or the Buddhists and all this. And so they said no. But then what he did is he took it to the people. He took it to the grassroots, and he said, well, are you all interested in talking to each other in interfaith capacities and solving problems together? And it took off, and it's now in over 100 countries. It touches millions of people through this grassroots interfaith network, which I think reinforces so much of what we've been talking about is the power of the people and the grassroots.
My name is Bill Cleveland, and I live in the city of Alexandria. We have a group called Alive, and where no organization or no religious group checks their information at the door. There is one common cause, and that is to feed seniors and to feed those that don't have the money to do so. And every month, we get together, all of us, all religions, to make sure that seniors get enough food for a month, and those that don't have the money get enough food for a month. And that is religions working together for a common cause. You don't have to break off those, and we'll find other common causes to get together where we don't have to check our religion at the door.
Yeah, it's a great example. Yeah. Other comments, questions? Got a few more minutes. Yeah.
Negative peace, sort of. I was wondering about the term negative peace, which I just have to say I'm not a fan of, but I'd like to know, where does that come from? Is that like an academic term, or is that just something here? It's an academic term?
Actually, it comes from my father's family, but sorry. Right up. No.
Seems like it would be healthier to have gradations of what is conflict rather than gradations of peace. It feels like it muddies up the word.
Emily, was that your name? Yeah. Do you want to say more about negative peace and what you're learning about it?
Oh, I've been out of grad school for like a year, so I can't remember exactly. But yeah, no, we just learned, and actually funny, Lou, our times didn't overlap, but we both went to the same graduate school. But just in my very basic memory, Negative peace is just the absence of conflict, so no war. But positive peace is actually like building structures and like maybe building education. But I see what you're saying about how maybe instead of different instances of peace, it should be different instances of conflict. But that was a long way to answer. Yes, it is an academic term, I think.
Well, images are always very powerful and very impactful in our lives. And I'd like to bring an image back for us all to reflect on that I think you might potentially remember seeing. We at the Global Peace Foundation in certain of our presentations use this image, and it's a photo. The Haiti tragedy was and catastrophe was referenced earlier. You may remember that, of course, under all the rubble and several weeks or many days, I should say, of digging and trying to find whether there would be any survivors, there was this image of this little boy where all of the responders had come into from all over the world. And finally, after over a week, this little boy was extricated from under the rubble. And this image that went certainly viral and was brought out all over the news, front page news of all of the newspapers in the country, had this little black boy with this incredible smile on his face being brought up from underneath whatever, that he was extricated from, and standing up around, waiting for that surfacing, waiting for that young boy to surface. You had the different races and those with the hard hats, and as he's coming up and his arms is reaching to the sky, exclaiming freedom and survival, you had these big burly white rescuers that are also throwing their arms up in exclamation of joy and hope and satisfaction. And that image, if you look at, and I wish that you could bring it up so you could see it, because you had different races, no one in that image is asking the question about religion. No one in that photo is asking the question about race. No one in that photo is asking the question about nationality. It is a moment of connectedness that I think Jim Flynn referenced earlier, of that humanness of without excuse, without any justification, we just exclaim and proclaim life.
Yeah.
And I think I'd like to just kind of not leave us, but add that to the photo and the image that we look at as we go forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as I think we've talked about in several of these other sessions, the importance of images. We have a number of photojournalists here who've shared some of those images with us, and they can be extremely powerful, and particularly images that show people working together for a common cause, even if they may have some obvious differences, are extremely powerful. Yeah. Well, we're just about done with this. Do we have one more question? All right, let's do one more question.
Hi. Hello. Okay, Susie Dodson. This is not a question, but a little bit to follow on. The one thing, I know people always talk about being divided. We're so divided, blah, blah, blah. I don't see our country that way. I see our country as a country that's very united in the sense that where I grew up, I grew up in the Air Force family, and then now I live in a neighborhood that's mixed. And people, like my neighbor has, Trump supporter, whatever, Democrat, whatever, but we're neighbors. And there's no, at the local level in the neighborhood, we're not divided. We come together. Like if a hurricane comes by, everybody comes out, is everybody okay? If the weather's bad, if somebody at the ambulance, comes down the street, everybody's out supporting each other. And I think that's part of the, we have to remember that. When you see these words, or even when we speak them about being divided, we have to remember that. In essence, we're not divided. We really aren't. I was in the hospital for a while last year, and it was like, when you're around people that are suffering, there's no division. There's no division. And it's the same thing when people are celebrating, like the football games that everybody talks about, or soccer or whatever. There's no division. So if we can find a way to try to balance the rhetoric instead of just focusing on that part of it and just balance it, I think that would help move us forward.
It's a great point. It's a great point. Well, thanks.
How about we give our panelists I'm so grateful we were able to put together.
You're killing us. There we go. Now we're on. I mean, it's just such a pleasure. One, I am excited that you are still here. We've had some folks fall by the wayside during the day, and that's okay, and I understand. But the good news is, if you've been tracking the program, we are going to finish early. We do not need 45 minutes to finish the program. We are on track, and we will be finishing early, which means you've got more opportunity to connect with each other. It also means if Heather didn't get the chance to interview you yet, we can still possibly get you on the camera. And if that's something, we would love to get your input, because what we want to do is we want to reach people who weren't here to have this experience and get as many perspectives as possible on what you feel people can do in order to lend their voices to the important conversations in their community amidst what some would say is a polarizing environment, or a polarized environment, but let's put it in perspective. Are we as polarized, to this young lady's point, are we as polarized as we were the day John Wilkes Booth ran down this alley? When you step back in a historical context, maybe it's not as bad as we think it is, as some in the media would portray it to be, as some in elected office would portray it to be, right? Some people are profiting, definitely, from the divisiveness. They are. And so as Arthur Brooks, who some of you read an op-ed that he wrote not too long ago, I think it was back in April, so maybe 6 months ago, that he titled Our Culture of Contempt. And he talked about the rhetorical dope peddlers who are profiting off of at least the appearance of division. And there are plenty of them out there. And he talked about what we can do as individuals, as citizens, in order to maybe tune that out and refocus on our neighbors and not be so anxious about what's coming in on our Twitter feed. So thank you for being here. I want to give some special thanks. And I hope you will join me, number one, to just a fantastic array of speakers, some of whom are still here. Bonnie Carroll. I am so grateful to the many people who helped those speakers find this this symposium today. I also want to thank our volunteers, and there are many, and so I want to name them really quickly just to let you know. And the first is the National Union Building, their staff, none of whom is here right now, but I do want to thank them. They have adapted, both the catering staff as well as the building staff. Everything we brought up in stride that we had an issue with, they fixed midstream. So please give them a warm round of applause. Dr. Paul Murray, who is not a staffer, he's on the board of directors, but he enlists Rachel, his wife, into a lot of what we do. And I want to thank you both for some real heavy lifting, for really pulling this off. So please give them a round of applause. She told me not to recognize her, but I'm going to do it anyway. Jamie Haig, sitting in the back, in a volunteer capacity. When I first met Jamie about 10 years ago, she earned the nickname First Sergeant. And anybody in uniform out there knows what that means. She's always in charge wherever she is. So we are very grateful. Nick and Ben Kepron are wielding, these guys are just, they got here early, they helped you get off the street, get registered, they wielded microphones all day long and did a bunch of other stuff behind the scenes. Just thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate, they are one of our speaker's sons. So Lou's sons, yeah, there she goes. Mom gets a hug. Yael Swerdlow, on our advisory board, the photographer of the day, in the back. Probably should have been a speaker too, but I couldn't get her to do everything, so she's back there. My own children who are back there behind, Rob and Heather Miska. Heather's doing interviews. Our sponsors, and I want to recognize Nathan's bending down and trying to avoid this scene, but he is with Glass River Media. He is not a volunteer. Nations Mosque, who had a bunch of folks come and supported us in this endeavor. Please give them a round of applause. Veterans for American Ideals. Emily is here. Several of them are here. The Inman Foundation and Ask Cindy, Inc., courtesy of Alan Inman. And last, I want to recognize Global Peace Foundation, who without their support, we would not be able to do this at all. They have really incubated us, and we are trying to flap our wings on our own. And they're, like any good parent, are going to make sure we learn to fly before they really push us out of the nest. So thank you, Jim, and everybody from Global Peace Foundation. I want to let you know a little bit about what we've got going forward. And we've got a long-range strategic planning process that the board of directors, our advisors, and others are embarking on with us. And we're calling it First Amendment Voice 2025. So we're trying to look down the road and set the pieces in place. And you'll hear more about this as the process unfolds. But I want to give you some thoughts on ways that you can contribute to that effort. And the first thing is that program that you have in your folder. That program, while it is very useful while you're in this event, to figure out where you need to go next and when lunch is and when can I get a bathroom break. It was professionally designed. And we use those programs all year long, because when I'm talking to a speaker who is interested but not quite sure they want to come to one of our programs, as soon as I show them that, they're in, because they recognize the quality of the experience that's getting ready to happen. So what you could help us with is take that program and use it to show people, because I would love to bring this type of experience to even more audiences and to people who might not even think they would ever get an invitation to something like this. We need to reach out into our society, and you can help us with that. You can take that program. You can recommend that if somebody's curious, sign up for our email list. It's free, and you'll get a monthly email, and our blogger is just incredible. She's really talented and interested in First Amendment issues and new ideas that are coming up in the First Amendment. You see it every day in the media with how technology is shaping things. And so please help us reach a broader audience. We would definitely appreciate that. It's such a heartwarming experience when I find somebody who comes and wants to learn more and be a part of a civil discussion. And so the last thing I will do, I forgot, somebody reminded me, I need to also remind you, the Symposium 2020. If you think you want to join us in Philadelphia next year, you're welcome to sign up today. You can get a 50% discount. If you're not quite sure, that's fine too. We also give donors free VIP tickets when they donate at certain thresholds. So I know some of them are still sitting in the audience too, and they're thinking, why am I going to buy the ticket now? Whatever your preference is, we find sponsors so that we can get people in seats for free as well, because we really believe that we want to get our programming to somebody who either, if cost is an obstacle, we want to remove that. And so what I want to do is thank our donors and our sponsors, because what you are enabling us to do when you make a donation is bring this type of programming to somebody who either might not be able to afford it, or even worse than that, they might not think they're worthy of sitting in an audience like this. And we want to dispel that myth, because our government is only as healthy as the vibrancy of its citizenry. And if we've got people that don't feel their voice matters, or they're just scared, those are the challenges First Amendment Voice is tackling. So please join me in that endeavor. The last thing I'm going to share with you is a voice from New York City. And I shared it with some folks last night, and I'm sorry if you were there and you have to hear it again. But this is something that really boosted my morale about 2 weeks ago. A writer from New York City who only found out about us because he connected on LinkedIn when he saw some of the posts our blog writer is putting there. And he connected with me and he said, I'd like to have a conversation with you off LinkedIn. And this is what he sent. Greetings from Brooklyn. I just wanted to send a quick note outside of the LinkedIn ecosystem to express my admiration for what you and your colleagues are working toward with First Amendment Voice, and also to offer my thanks. For the past few years, frustrated with what I've seen happening in Washington, D.C., I've contributed a number of opinion pieces to media outlets in the U.S. and abroad. Writing those pieces was certainly cathartic. But it's also become clear that I've sort of been shouting similar organizations espouses hits home. I don't disavow the arguments I've made in those op-eds, not all of them anyway. But engaging with others rather than voicing disgust and yes, even anger, does seem a far more rational way to go.
Thank you for the work you're doing today. Thank you for the They've got me thinking as a consistent. And good luck with the proposal there that my biggest back then. And what I want to let you know about that
Is to me what it helped confirm is that we try very hard to remain nonpartisan. We don't take a position on an issue. We don't tell people how to think about an issue. We just try to encourage them to think about the issue and educate themselves as much as possible and make their own choices according to their own convictions. And it's something we feel really strongly about. And that response is really heartwarming for me because it's so hard to figure out if we're making a difference, if we're reaching people. Like if you're here in the audience, we feel pretty good about that because we know we're preaching to the choir here, right? But there's all kinds of stuff going out on LinkedIn and Twitter and everything, and it's hard to tell if you're having an impact. And that is what we're shooting for. And we always want to have the impact in person when we're able to, but there's only so many ways we can clone Janessas to get them out there and reach people, or Larry's or Kern, and we know the in-person programming is really effective when we're able to bring speakers in, but we want to amplify that to the extent possible, and you can be part of that. So please talk to your family members. I know that I mentioned this previously. 1 in 6 Americans since the 2016 election has stopped talking to a family member. 1 in 6. Knight Foundation survey within, I think it was the last 4 or 5 months. That is heartbreaking. And so please reach out. Try to, if we give you tools that are helpful, use them, but there's a lot of other stuff out there. And we try to highlight those partners as well that are doing really good work in this space. So thank you. I am grateful for your attendance. Please talk to Heather if you get a chance. She'll ask you a question about how you think you can lend your voice to important conversations in your community. Talk to each other, stay in touch, swap business cards, and thank you for being here today. It has really been a pleasure.